Hi, good morning. My name is Bipin Kulkarni and I welcome you to the video on how to become a cybersecurity expert. In this video, we are going to discuss the various domains in cybersecurity. We are going to look at the certifications available and we are going to try to map them up with the job roles that are available in the security space today. So what's in it for you? We start off with the baseline on what is the qualification required to enter this field. We then look at the various domains in cybersecurity, the foundational cybersecurity courses from where you can begin your career, the managerial cybersecurity courses which would be utilized by people in a managerial position, some advanced cybersecurity courses, and then the job roles that are available in cybersecurity. Let's start off with the educational qualifications first. So as far as educational qualification is concerned, having a graduate degree in computer science or IT security or related field is given. Having a master's program or a master's degree is an added advantage. There are a lot of universities out there in today's world that offer both bachelor's and master's degrees in cybersecurity or various computer fields. You might want to look them up before you decide which university you want to go with. There are private institutes like EC Council, SANS, or CompTIA that offer these kind of programs as well. The costs vary. Some of them are correspondence, some of them are physical in nature. So let's talk about the skills that you require to become a cybersecurity expert or an engineer. These are your baseline skills. It will be very important that you have some of the knowledge out of all of these tasks. It may not be necessary that you have everything at the start itself, but it will help you if you start building on these technologies before you start looking at advanced certifications. So you need to have solid ground in IT fundamentals, which means that you need to understand computers, you need to understand how they function, the components of a computer, maybe what's a processor, what is a cache, basically understanding the hardware part of it, right? Then solid ground in networking fundamentals. Hackers normally target the network. You want to hack over the internet, you want to hack over the intranet. There are a lot of protocols that are required and are utilized for data to be transmitted from one point to another. There are a lot of routing protocols of how a data packet can be converted from an internal IP address to an external IP address, how that packet is going to take a path to the endpoint and how is it going to travel back to your machine, and how your machine and the endpoint machine are going to interact with each other. So having a good understanding of networking and how computers function over the intranet and the internet is a very much required knowledge base. Coding skills. Now, as far as coding is concerned, we are not going to develop applications over here, but some scripting skills would be necessary, especially if you're going into network security and host-based security. For example, you want to write your own exploit in various tools like Metasploit, so you might want to learn languages like Ruby. However, if you're going to go into application security, then knowing Java, knowing C++, those kind of languages is a must. You may not be able to write complex programs, but you need to understand how those functions are being called. You need to know standard secure coding practices that need to be utilized for an application to be secure. Then understanding the architecture of an operating system. It is imperative that we know how operating systems function, and not function from a usability perspective, but from a troubleshooting perspective. We need to understand if there is an error on the operating system, how do we troubleshoot that? We need to understand how processes work in the background, how memory mapping works in the background, what web application pools are being utilized, and the various protocols that are being consumed by the operating system. Now, cloud security is a very niche skill in today's world, but cloud, as we all know, is here to stay, and most of the organizations that you'll deal with will either have a private cloud, a public cloud, or a hybrid cloud. So it is imperative that you upskill yourself, understanding how cloud technologies work, how they can be integrated in your day-to-day infrastructure, and how you can secure a cloud. Now, this doesn't become a baseline requirement. Obviously, you'll need to grow and you'll need to build based on the expertise that you have. But over a period of time, it would benefit you to have cloud security knowledge. And then malware analysis and reversing. When we're talking about cybersecurity, one of the most common attacks that we'll see would be from a virus or a Trojan. So understanding how these softwares work, how to identify them, how to troubleshoot them, how to reverse engineer them, and analyze these malwares becomes important. Again, this may not be a baseline requirement, but you need to hone on your skills on understanding malwares and reverse engineering them, especially if you're going into a malware analysis kind of a role. Let's start with the domains in cybersecurity. Let's understand what kind of domains are available and how we can map them as we go ahead with certifications and our job roles. So starting with the domains in cybersecurity, there is access control systems and methodologies, telecommunications and network security, security management and practices. Access control systems and methodologies would talk about identity and access management, single sign-ons, federation. So basically designing access controls, identifying the people who are trying to log in, authenticating them, and then authorizing them to access some resources that are there in your organization. So we're basically talking about the IEEE standards over here: identification, authorization, authentication, and accountability. Then there's telecommunications and network security. So you start up here with certifications like CCNA, CCNP, where you're talking about communications and protocols that work on the intranet and the internet. So how to secure these protocols, how to deploy these protocols to start off with, how to configure switches, routers, and how to secure them so that data leakages or attacks on your networks can be minimized. Then we have security management practices, which basically deal with disaster recovery and business continuity planning. So here you're planning about system failures because of various attacks like a distributed denial of service or a virus or a ransomware attack, or even environmental attacks like natural disasters like fires or flooding, and man-made disasters where people cannot show up to work, and you have to ensure that your business continuity is not affected because any of these factors. Security architectures and models. So this domain focuses mostly on having security policies and procedures. So here you're more on a managerial perspective where you're creating policies to be implemented in your organizations. Policies are nothing but high-level standards which you need to implement. For example, what level of encryption you want. Do you want to use a policy would include things like data classification. So you're identifying data and you're classifying them based on the sensitivity of that data towards your organization. For example, some of that data could be classified, some of them could be secret, top secret, and some data could be unclassified. So these policies help you identify and decide how you're going to treat security in your organization. Then we have law investigation and ethics. So this domain can be mapped with the forensic investigations. So for example, a crime has happened, somebody has got compromised, some data has been compromised. You as a forensic investigator come in and try to analyze what went wrong. You try to analyze what has been affected, to what extent has been affected, how did the attack happen. Then application and system development security. Now this is where you're talking about application security. So let's say you go into a software development lifecycle, you're developing an application and you want to treat that application with security in mind. So your OWASP top 10 open web application security project comes in. You look at the top 10 risks like injection attacks, maybe cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and you try to mitigate these attacks by following secure coding practices, testing the application from a security perspective, and ensuring that your coding is strong enough to withstand such attacks. Cryptography. So this is where you go into the encryption phase, where you are going to try to create solutions on which kind of encryptions you want to utilize to protect which kind of data. If you remember earlier on, we talked about policies where we did data classification, where some data is sensitive, some data is classified, top secret, and those different various classifications. Now, to keep costs at bay, you cannot use the same encryption across, because what you're using for confidential information or secret information would be a very high level encryption, which would cost you a lot of money to implement. So in cryptography, it's basically you becoming an expert in understanding which kind of encryption standards you want to implement on what kind of data, or what kind of solutions you want to integrate on an organizational level. So here you'll be looking at data in use, when data is being consumed by a user, data in motion, when it's being transmitted, for example, the HTTPS connection that we have with websites, or data in rest, when data is being stored onto a stationary hard disk and you want to encrypt that. Then you have the computer operation security. So this would be covering your day-to-day security operations. So something that we call a SOC, a security operations center, where you're going to look at all the various incidents that happen on a regular basis. You're going to investigate those incidents and you're going to see if they're going to affect your organization's security in any which manner, and then trying to come up with a solution to prevent that from happening. And the final part is physical security. Now, this does look like it may not cover IT security, but it does. For example, your doors that you're going to place to sensitive areas. For example, a server room. You do not want anyone and everyone access to that server room. So what kind of security are you going to use to secure that server room? For example, CCTV cameras or biometrics on your doors. So what kind of doors do you want there in the first place? Do you want to keep security guards over there and they are going to frisk people to see if they are carrying anything that can be used to manipulate the security of the servers? Moving on from the domains, let's start with the foundational cybersecurity courses. Now, the first four that are populating the screen: CEH, Security Plus, Certified Network Defender, and the Forensic Investigator. Now, they are mapped as foundational cybersecurity courses, but in their own right, they are still advanced courses, because if you see, they do assume that you have some knowledge on scripting, you may have some basic knowledge on operating systems, but you are technically adept at analyzing problems. So they do assume a little bit of knowledge from your side. If you're a fresher, you want to hone up a little bit on your networking skills, you want to hone up a little bit on how operating systems work and how their processes work, and then you want to attempt these certifications. The first one being Certified Network Defender. Now, this is a certificate that talks about network security. CEH, on the other hand, talks about an ethical hacker from an offensive security perspective, where you're doing a penetration test and you're going to try to leverage attacks against an organization to analyze how their security is. CompTIA Security Plus also is on the same lines of CEH. CEH is offered by an organization called EC Council. The competitor to them is CompTIA. Both of them are globally accepted certifications, widely accepted across the Americas, Europe, and Asia. The CHFI, which is the Computer Hacking Forensic Investigator certification, is basically the niche certification for forensic investigators. You can directly attempt the CHFI, but if you don't know how hackers work, it may defeat some of the purpose. So it would help to first go for the CEH or the Security Plus and then the Forensic Investigator certification. Let's look at a brief overview on each of these. To start off with the CEH, it is going to train you in reverse engineering. So this is where penetration testers come in, and the word ethical hackers. Hackers are basically people who try to get unauthorized access to various resources. Ethical hacker is where you're going to emulate or simulate those attacks with an authorization from the organization, so you still keep it legal. The aim is to find out various flaws in the current deployment of security controls and then try to figure out how you can plug those flaws and increase or improve on the security posture. So it's CEH and CompTIA Security Plus are about the same. It's just the difference of the certification body, but both of these are widely accepted and globally accepted as well. Then we have the Certified Network Defender, covers protection, identification, and response on how we approach network security. So this is the certification that is going to explain you certain protocols. We're going to talk about switches, routers, various technologies of LAN, WAN, MAN, and we're going to talk about how we can secure networks on an organizational perspective. The Forensic Investigator certification, as we've discussed, is in the domain of law, investigation, and ethics. It talks more about analyzing how the attack happened, what was affected, what was compromised, to what extent, and then we are trying to reverse engineer and try to identify the culprit of who attacked that organization. After the foundational, we are going to look at the managerial cybersecurity courses. Now here, you are either a cybersecurity manager or you're looking at a lead kind of a scenario where you are responsible to manage the team who's going to implement security in your organization. The difference here is the previous courses are very technical in nature, very hands-on in nature, and you are the person who's going to be responsible to implement that security control or test that security control. Here, in managerial cybersecurity courses, you're not going to be technical hands-on, but you're going to be more on the policy side of things. So start off with COBIT. COBIT talks about control objectives for information and related technologies. Now this is an advanced kind of a certification. Then we have CISM. Some people call it CISM as well. It's a Certified Information Security Manager certification. Then we have CISA or CISA, Certified Information Systems Auditor. And then we have the CRISC, which is a Certified in Risk and Information Systems Control. So as you can see just from the names, nothing hands-on, no penetration testing, no vulnerability assessments, no implementation of tools, but you're going to have a holistic view of how vulnerabilities and threats are going to affect the organization, and you will be responsible to manage and guide the team on what to be implemented and what to be consumed So you will be managing teams, technical teams, on how to implement security and how to analyze that security. You'll try to make sense of data that has been provided to you and utilize that data to make business sense. So what is COBIT? It gives you a deep understanding of the framework for managing and governing enterprise IT environments. So it's all about the environment. Now you're in an enterprise organization. This is a standard, so it gives you a basic framework of how you want to implement security from an end-to-end perspective. You're going to talk about IT governance here. You're going to deal with a lot of stakeholders over here. You're going to get a lot of various inputs, and you're going to analyze that information, and you're going to implement the framework based on the analysis that you have done. People with COBIT certifications and who've been hired as managers would normally have around 8-9 years of experience, and only then would they be put in such a position. CISM, the Security Manager certification. It is a key certification for information security professionals who manage, design, oversee, and assess enterprise information security. So this is more from a project management perspective, but projects regarding security. So it is a semi-technical certification. It is necessary that you understand the technical terms of hacking or ethical hacking. You have a basic understanding of what kind of risks or attacks are present in a cybersecurity enterprise, and then you're going to manage the project and try to implement security and analyze that security to see everything meets standards. So as far as a security manager is concerned, since we're talking about a manager portfolio, you obviously will have to have some experience before you get these kind of job roles. Then comes the CISA or the CISA, the systems auditor. It will give you the skill sets to govern and control enterprise IT and perform an effective security audit on any organization. So this is more of a system auditor's profile, where you're going to talk about overall functioning of IT infrastructure in an organization. You're going to audit that infrastructure to ensure that it meets standards, and you're going to look at the risks that that are going to affect this infrastructure. You're going to do a risk management exercise, and then you're going to come up with security controls on how to minimize or mitigate these risks. The CRISC, there's another risk management certification, but it is widely accepted and it has a lot of value globally. This course will enable you to design, implement, monitor, and maintain information security controls for enterprises. Now, this certification only deals with risk management. So it has a complete strategy that evolves and revolves around risk identification, assessment, response, and control monitoring. So the major job position that you're going to have is in an IT infrastructure, identifying the risks or identifying the security risks that the organization is going to face. You're going to assess them, so a business impact analysis. If that risk comes true, how is it going to affect the business, not only from a technical perspective but from a monetary perspective as well. And then you're going to do a cost benefit analysis for a security control. For example, I figured out that a web application has a SQL injection attack vulnerability. If the assessment proves that if this becomes real, or if this is realized by a hacker, we would be looking at a potential loss of $1 million, and we'll have to report it to the regulatory authority, which would then lead to further fines. So here, then we're going to figure out a response to this threat, where let's say we identify a web application firewall, and an implementation of that firewall will minimize the risk. At the same time, a developer would come into the picture and say we can redevelop the application or that part of the application where the vulnerability exists, and we can ensure that the application is secure. Now, when you do a cost benefit analysis, you figure out that for the recoding of that part of that application would take at least 6 months and is going to cost us a lot of money. Whereas if we implement a web application firewall, it will just cost us around $50,000 and we would still minimize $1 million risk. Now here, it is the responsibility of the risk manager to identify which solution would benefit the organization in the long run. So that's where your cost benefit analysis comes in, and then you're going to implement the solution, and then you're going to continuously monitor it to ensure that the risk doesn't surface again. So it depends on which organization you're talking about, but you would need at least 3 to 4 years of experience in risk strategy before you become a risk manager. But these are the certifications that are going to identify and help you in your career path as we go ahead. Now, before we go into cloud computing courses, just one point that I want to highlight here. The first courses that we talked about were technical, the second were managerial in perspective. Now, even if it is IT security that we talk about, in today's world, it is more on the business side that everyone starts making sense. So for example, when you start talking to the management, you always will talk about it about security from a monetary perspective and a business impact analysis perspective. So as we go ahead in IT security career paths, you will always mature from a technical guy to a semi-technical guy and then over over a period to a managerial person, and then probably the C-level executives like the CISO, the CFO, or the CTO, Chief Technology Officer. So let's start with the next topic, the cloud computing courses. As discussed, these are not mandatory, but with today's world where everybody has jumped onto the cloud computing bandwagon, you will want to expand your horizons and get cloud security under your belt as well. The two courses on your screen, the CCSP and the CCSK, are vendor neutral courses and are more towards a managerial perspective rather than technical perspective. So the CCSP is the Certificate of Cloud Security Professional. This certification is given to you by ISC Square, whereas the CCSK is a Certificate of Cloud Security Knowledge given to you by an organization called Cloud Security Alliance. CCSP, the Certificate of Cloud Security Professionals, again has a holistic view of cloud security. They have listed 6 different domains in the certification, and ISC Square has created a common body of knowledge based on which it will give you a holistic view of what steps do you want to look at for various deployments in a cloud security. Now this becomes an advanced certification. The first certification that came across was the CCSK, which is from a non-profit organization called Cloud Security Alliance. Now this is again a web-based examination. This one is a little bit easier to attend than the CCSP. So if you want to enter the cloud security arena, I would suggest you start with the CCSK certificate and then move on to CCSP. If it is technical that you have in mind, then you become vendor specific. So either you go for Amazon Web Services for a public cloud or Microsoft Azure. Or if you want to look at private clouds, we've got VMware certifications and we've got Microsoft Hyper-V, we've got Citrix certifications. So depending on which vendor or which solution that you want to deal with, you'll have to identify those vendors and you'll have to get certified on those specific technologies. Each vendor has their own set of certifications. You can just visit their websites and they have a career path for their individual certifications there as well. Let's talk about advanced cybersecurity courses. Now, the gold standard in advanced cybersecurity courses is obviously the CISP or the CISSP, which is the Certified Information Systems Security Professional. So when you're headed for the management courses or you're going to look at profiles like the Chief Technology Officer or the Chief Information Security Officer, you're looking at this particular course. This is a very difficult exam to crack because you need that experience. You just cannot read books, gather knowledge from those books and pass this exam. In fact, you have to prove that you have 5 years of experience in 2 of the domains that CISSP talks about. If you don't, you can still attempt the exam, but you get certified as an associate of the ISC Square for CISSP, and you got 6 years to complete the 5-year experience bracket. The passing rate of that exam is less than 50%, so it's a tough exam to crack. Currently, the exam consists of 100 to 150 questions, and you have to answer those in 3 hours. Now that sounds like a simple task, but the areas that are covered in this certification are vast, and the knowledge that is required and the experience that is required is very high as well. I have seen people gain around 15 years of experience in the IT field and then attempt the CISSP. That being said, I've also seen people with very good knowledge clear the exam by studying for just a couple of weeks. So it depends on how good you are, how good your knowledge is, how good your experience is, how good your understanding on various topics is, and based on that you can crack this exam easily as well. The domains in CISSP are as such. We start off with asset security, then we have security architecture and engineering, communications and network security, identity and access management, security operations, security assessment and testing, software development security, and security and risk management. Now we start off with security and risk management. It talks about again the risk assessment strategies, the risk assessment life cycles, risk calculators, and a lot of other terminology like an annual loss expectancy, a single loss expectancy, etc. Asset security will talk about physical assets or data assets and how you're going to secure them and the strategies revolving that. Security architecture and engineering will talk about models, security models or frameworks that will help us create a policy and administer that policy on our organization. Communication and network, obviously we'll talk about network security, different protocols. This topic is all about mapping the OSI layer, the TCP/IP layer, understanding which protocols work where, and the various encryption strategies that are there in securing communications. Identity and access management, this talks about access control lists, single sign-ons, and so on and so forth. Security operations, the day-to-day operations of a security operations center, where you're going to look at incident management, change management, and problem management. Security assessment and testing, vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. Software development security, the software development lifecycle, where you're going to talk about secure coding practices in an application. You're going to talk about various models that are utilized, like the waterfall model or the agile model, to be implemented for application security. So if you remember some slides back, we were talking about the various domains in cybersecurity. Now, if you map those slides with this, you will understand that CISSP basically governs everything that works in the IT security space. So it needs a lot of understanding, a lot of knowledge for this certification. So let's talk about the job roles in cybersecurity. Now, every organization will have its own naming convention and their job titles. So this may vary a little bit in the real world, but these are the baseline job requirements and job functions that will be available or that are required in today's world in cybersecurity. So let's start talking about these roles. So the first one is Chief Information and Security Officer, also known as CISO or CISO. Now, this is a very privileged position and is a managerial position in the organization. Here you own the cybersecurity of the entire organization, and your job role is to ensure proper policies, proper frameworks, and proper standards are followed in your organization. So it's a very holistic view that you have. There's no hands-on involved. You will not be involved in VAPT, but you may actually ask your team to conduct a vulnerability assessment and penetration test. If needs requires, you'll just take the reports, analyze them, and guide the rest of the team in how to proceed with those particular incidents. So you start off with at least a graduate degree in computer science or in IT security or a master's. That's a given. Your certifications could be all of these or any of these. A CISSP is a required certificate at this point in time. The systems auditor or systems manager or the risk management certification would obviously help your cause and help you gain that knowledge that is required for this particular job role. Now, since this is a managerial role, the requirement is also very high. You will have to have at least 15 years of experience before you reach this position. So you already should have worked in the IT security field in multiple domains. You should have had these certifications during this period, which would then qualify you to become a CISO of an organization. Your skills obviously would be ethical hacking, no hands-on, but you understand those attacks, you know how they have done, you are conversant with how these technologies work, you know the OSI layer, the TCP layer, you know networking, you know how attacks can be created and perpetrated. Computer forensics, knowledge of that would obviously be necessary over here, or would be an advantage if you are certified in forensic investigations, because in case of a breach, you can guide the team of where exactly to look for what kind of data. Mobile security, for if your organization has a bring your own device policy, that would help you understand how to implement security parameters and how to control data that is going to leave your organization on some employees' mobile phones. An example here would be employees configuring their emails on their mobile phones, and thus the attachments can be downloaded on those phones, and you want to ensure that those documents or attachments do not get compromised. Cloud security is also necessary here, because most of the organizations that you will see will be connected to a cloud or will be consuming some services from the cloud. For example, Salesforce, customer relationship management softwares, or Office 365 getting integrated with an in-house domain. Networking knowledge is a must. Your work experience, like I said, would be around 15 years minimum, and you should have worked in network security. You should know storages. You should have a basic understanding of how hardware works. You should have skills on vendor management and protecting systems against advanced persistent threats. So you should know how IDSS, IPSS work. You should know the latest trends in the security market, and you should understand which vendors to approach at what point in time. Salaries could range from 100,000 USD to 125,000, or in India 15 lakh rupees to 25 lakh rupees. Now, these are baseline salaries. It will obviously depend on what kind of an organization you are joining. If it's a startup, your salaries may not be that high, or if it's a global organization, your salaries could be way more than what have been projected on the screen. The next role we can talk about is an information security analyst. Now here again, the requirement is that you understand security from a holistic perspective. You're going to collect data, you're going to analyze that data, and you're going to interpret that data based on your knowledge, based on your experience, and try to figure out if there is something wrong or if there is something dishonest going on in the organization. For example, collecting a data dump of a networking device for a segment of time, and then analyzing the packets that are going through that particular segment to see if there are any background services running, any background data leakages happening. Or it could be as simple as you joining a security operations center, and when an incident arises, you become that security analyst where you analyze the incident, you try to investigate what has happened, and then you come out with what exactly has been impacted, and then try to find a resolution for that. So your baseline again is you're going to be a graduate in computer science or an IT security field. Masters would always be helpful, but here it is not required. A bachelor's degree is more than sufficient. So the certifications that you'll require here are the CISA Plus, which is the Cybersecurity Analyst from CompTIA, and the EC Council Security Analyst from EC Council. Now these two certificates help you understand how you can collect data, what data sources are available, and how to configure them, and how to analyze that data. That is what these courses are all about. The CISSP course again here would be an added advantage for you to understand how to convert that data into risk analysis and then give a business impact analysis to your manager along with the technical report. So the skills that you're going to require for this job: information assurance. Assurance is the part where you are investigating to ascertain that the security controls that have been implemented are working correctly. For example, there is a security architect who has identified that a firewall needs to be placed, and there's a configuration that has been done on the firewall. A security analyst over a period of time will analyze the effectiveness of that particular firewall and see if there are any gaps or if there are any problems with the device and if it needs any more fine-tuning. You will also need to know a little bit of scripting languages. So Python, it's a scripting language, and when we say Linux over here, we're obviously talking about the bash scripting scenario where you can create your own scripts and use those scripts to analyze certain scenarios. Cryptography, again, encryption, understanding of encryption, how it works, because you're going to analyze that kind of data. So cryptography is a required skill set. Network security is a must across all platforms, across all roles, because that's how computers communicate with each other over the intranet and the internet. Work experience, network architecture, so courses like CCNA, CCNP, CCIE would be helpful for you to understand how network works. Now this is assuming that you're using Cisco devices. For other devices like Juniper, there are different courses from those vendors. Log management, so understanding how a syslog server works or how a SIEM tool works, and utilizing those tools to collect data and use that data for further analysis. The salary here could vary from 95,000 to 123,000 USD or 5 lakhs to 18 lakhs per annum in India. Again, the salaries are baselines, depends on which organization you're joining. Startup may not be able to pay you that much. Global organization could pay you a lot more than what is being showcased. But these are the average salaries across all job roles. Right. So let's talk about the forensic computer analyst job profile. So the forensic computer analyst job role is where your job description would be to analyze after attack has been identified or an impact has been observed in your organization. So this job role would definitely be after the attack has happened. So you will be going in and you're going to try to analyze what got impacted, how did that attack happen, which all components have been affected, and if there has been any data breach. So the other role would be where you're going to do a reverse engineering, trying to identify who attacked you, IP addresses, MAC addresses, or any trace that you can find of the attacker. And how exactly did the attack take place? What was the vulnerability? What was the exploit? And that would give you a knowledge which you can pass on to the security analyst, who can then further try to resolve that particular problem. Your certifications would be CHFI, which is a Certified Hacking Forensic Investigation certificate that we saw from EC Council. There are other certificates in the market as well, such as CFCE and GCFA. The skills that you're going to require here are analytical skills. You're going to analyze a lot of data. Now understand the fact that the attack has happened. It has been identified by some reason, and you are being tasked with the requirement of identifying what exactly happened, what got affected, and to what extent has been the damage. So you're trying to reverse engineer something that has already happened, and you're going to try to think of how an attacker would have created that particular attack. Obviously, you'll have to create reports after that, and your report writing skills should be excellent. Your communication should be somewhat of a techno-managerial kind of a scenario. So you should be technical, you know all the technical things, but you can translate them into simple English for non-technical people to understand. Now, understand the fact that when you send these reports to the management will have basic understanding of those keywords. They would not be technically adept of hacking or of forensics. So your report writing skills would be a huge requirement at this point in time. Your communications, how you communicate with your peers, how you're going to communicate your requirements, what you want for that analysis, what kind of tools do you require. And when you create those reports and you're going to communicate them, or you're going to present them to the management in very precise manner, that's where your communication skills would be required. And your knowledge on digital storage devices, where you're going to acquire data and you're going to store that data. For example, there may be scenarios where a law enforcement agency may come in and you will have to collect that data in a manner where you have to store it and then present it in a court as evidence later on. So here, some requirements would be where you know the law of the land and you know how to acquire that evidence, how to store that evidence, you know the chain of custody, so that you can present that data in a court of law and prove that it is still valid data. Your work experience, you should know your operating systems, how those processes work, where the cache is, how is it stored, how is data processed, so that you can access those areas of the operating systems or those applications, and you can extract that data from those storage areas. Scripting languages would be required for you to create, let's say, PowerShell scripts or Bash scripts, depending on the operating system, and then automate some tasks for collecting some data. Data processing skills, because you're going to collect data, you're going to process that data, you're going to look at processes that are running in the background. So all of that would be required as a work experience. Salary again would vary from 69,000 to 114,000 USD, and in India around 5 lakhs to 18 lakhs per annum. Looking at a security architect's role. So a security architect is a person who designs and architects security. So your job role would be where, let's say, there's a network deployment that's going to happen and you are being called in to design a plan on how you want to implement security on the entire network. Or you could be on the cloud and you want a new deployment on the cloud and you're talking about cloud security. So here you're going to design how that security is going to function. Your job roles would be where you want to place those firewalls, what kind of firewalls you want to place, or what kind of IDSS, IPSS, unified threat management systems, or endpoint antivirus systems would be required. Here you would be looking at security controls and placement of those security controls in various scenarios. For example, what kind of email filters do you want to create, or what kind of email scanning you want to implement in your organization to scan incoming attachments or outgoing emails. Another example would be where you are looking at routing and you're looking at how data packets are going to travel across the network, and you have some dedicated paths that you have to create to ensure that all those packets go through a firewall. A firewall is configured in a particular manner which will either allow or disallow that packet based on the configuration that you are going to suggest. Again, the baseline would be graduate in a computer science or an IT security field. Here, a master's degree would be advisable over the period of your career, right? And again, your courses like CEH, the Certified Ethical Hacking course, or the Security Plus, or the ECSA course, the EC Council Certified Security Analyst course would be prescribed. CISSP is open across all tables, across all job roles. So as you get experience and you've got at least 5 years of experience, that's when you try to attempt the CISSP certification. But you start off with CEH, then you move on to ECSA, Security Plus, and then that's your career path to become a security architect. Again, the experience here would be at least 7 to 8 years in IT security to become a successful security architect at an organizational level. Skills, operating systems, application security, cloud security, network security. You're going to design the security of an organization or of a particular product. So you need to know almost anything and everything there is about information technology. Work experience, as suggested, 7 to 8 years is ideal, but anything between 5 to 10 years would be a requirement in IT security. The 5 to 10 years of experience that we're talking about is entirely in IT security. So you either have a vulnerability management experience or a patch management experience, or you have experience in application security, or in network security. So all of that combined should be around 5 to 10 years for you to become a successful security architect. Salaries would range from 50,000 to 100,000 US dollars and 6 lakhs to 20 lakhs in Indian rupees. Then let's talk about the IT security consultant. Now, the main job role of a consultant is to provide intelligence on various technologies. So here you could become a business consultant where you may need to go to the client side, check their requirements, come back to your organization, and then detail the team of the requirements and then map the solutions that you're going to offer based on those requirements. Or a client needs to implement a security architecture or needs to implement security controls. You as a consultant just advise them how it is done, what is required, what kind of policies should be there, and then provide that expertise to them. So this is basically more of a business oriented role from a security perspective. This is where you have to know it all. So not only technical, but you'll also need to have knowledge on how businesses function, what kind of security controls are available, and which security controls to position at what security areas. So again, physical security is also in play. You're going to talk about CCTV cameras. You're going to talk about physical security about server rooms. You're going to talk about disaster recovery and business continuity planning. So this basically becomes a consultant's view of how a business should function in the long run. Again, the educational requirement, a graduate degree in computer science or IT security or a master's degree is advisable at this point in time. CISSP, CRISC, CISM, these are a must. Like I said, these are advanced certifications and this is an advanced job profile as well. So assuming you have CISSP, that already assumes that you probably would have done your CEH or Security Plus or CISA Plus and those certifications earlier on in your career path. Here, programming skills, again, you shouldn't be a developer. That's not a requirement, but you should understand programming. You should look at secure coding practices and you should understand how those practices are to be implemented in a software development lifecycle. Risk management is a must at this point in time. You need to identify threats. You need to identify how those threats are posing a risk to the organization, your risk management skills, how you're going to calculate that risk and present it to the management. Not only the next skill, not only firewalls, but IDS, IPSs, any security controls that you can implement, including identity access and management. Knowing your operating systems is a must. Windows, Linux, or maybe Mac, the various flavors of Linux operating systems, and understanding of encryption. Let's say how the public key infrastructure works, what is a private key, what is a public key, symmetric and asymmetric encryption, and all of those details is something that you should know. Work experience, a minimum around 5 to 10 years of professional experience, after which you can be eligible for a IT security consultant's job role. Salaries could vary from 80,000 to 86,000 US dollars and 5 lakhs to 19 lakhs in Indian rupees. Then we have the security systems administrator job profile. This is the systems administrator from a security perspective. So you're not going to be an administrator from administrator's perspective, such as administering Windows or Linux operating systems or their deployments, but you would be responsible for the security of these operating systems and creating a secure environment for the internal consumption of the organization. So as a security systems administrator, your job role would be to administrate, let's say, firewalls or the security of certain switches, routers, or data traffic, or you're going to analyze data traffic, or you're going to create rules of which protocols are allowed to pass through the firewall and which protocol should be blocked. The requirements, again, educational wise, you should be a graduate in computer science or IT security. CompTIA Security Plus, CEH, CCNP, CCNA, these are the certifications that you want to look at to become a system administrator. Skills, computers, networks is a must. So networking skills, understanding of how OSPF, BGP protocols work, maybe even VoIP. So SIP protocol comes into the picture here. Understanding the TCP/IP and the OSI layer, how these function, at what layer which protocol works, how these protocols translate into each other, and how the data packet is transmitted. Firewalls, any security controls, and your operating systems. Work experience, around 4 to 7 years of experience in the network field would allow you to be eligible for a systems security administrator profile. Salary here could be around 100,000 to 110,000, and in India it would be around 2 lakhs to 9 lakh Indian rupees. Then we have the IT security engineer. Now the IT security engineer would be a job role where you are a part of the security operations center, and there are incidents that come on in daily for the organization which you are going to investigate and you're going to try to resolve those incidents. So again, graduate in computer science or in IT security, graduation would be required. CEH, CCNP, CCNA or Security Plus, these are the certifications that you want to look at. Problem solving skills, that's a must because you're going to be solving those problems on a day-to-day basis, and you will have certain time frames that you have to adhere to. Computer languages, that's if you are going to be an application security engineer as well, where you want to debug some problems later on to analyze what the root cause was, and then try to translate that into and try to create a resolution based on that analysis. Support skills, because you're going to support the day-to-day activity of the organization. So whenever there is an incident, you will be the person who would be called. You're going to support these individuals who have faced these incidents, and you're going to resolve these problems for them. If the organization is using a cloud knowledge would be required. For example, there was an incident that happened on Office 365, and you're called in to analyze and collect logs from those particular deployments. So your understanding of cloud would help you at that point in time. Networking, obviously, yes, because again, like I said, network is the way where you're going to communicate on the intranet and the internet. So those skills would be required across all IT job profiles in the security field. Work experience, you should know security control, experience in securing cloud, maybe an ITIL or ITIL, the Information Technology Infrastructure Library certification would be something that you want to look at, because that talks about incident management, problem management, and change management, which is something that you'll be doing on a daily basis as a security engineer. Salaries would vary from 106,000 to 129,000 US dollars, or 3 lakhs to 10 lakhs Indian rupees. Then we have a penetration tester's profile. Now, this is completely technical. This is where you are an ethical hacker. So you're going to craft exploits, you're going to create those attacks, and you're going to try and figure out if those attacks can be successful against an organization. And if yes, you're going to create those reports and send it to your manager. So it's a complete hands-on role, complete technical role. And this is where your knowledge about anything and everything that is technical in the computer field is a must. So again, a graduate degree in information technology or cybersecurity, CEH, Security Plus, and LPT. Now CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, or Security Plus, these are baselines where penetration testing is taught. So these courses basically talk about ethical hacking, what are the requirements of an ethical hacker, how you're going to utilize these tools, and how you're going to create those attacks. So these are hands-on certifications which teach you how these attacks work, how to recreate those attacks yourselves, and what to expect out of those attacks. LPT, or the Licensed Penetration Tester, is an advanced certification which comes after the ECSA course, EC Council Security Analyst course. So this, as the name says, is a license from EC Council, which gives you a certificate to showcase that you have the required skills to become a penetration tester. Your skills, problem solving, scripting languages would be 100% necessary at this point in time, because you're going to create your own attacks. So you may have a requirement where you have to create your own PowerShell script to create an attack, or a bash script, or maybe writing an exploit in Metasploit in Ruby language. Knowledge of operating systems and software, so how applications work, what is an application programming interface, what is a common gateway interface, how do they transmit data, how do they handle data, how do applications talk to each other, how do applications talk to a database, and vice versa. All of those requirements come into the picture. Networking protocols, of course, networking, like I said, across all job profiles in IT security. Work experience, 2 to 4 years of experience in security with practice in penetration testing. So 2 to 4 years as a penetration tester. Now the question is, if you don't have experience, then how do you become a penetration tester? So there's a lot of bug bounty programs where you can enroll, and you can do it as a freelancer to hone your skills. And when you get those bounties against your name, you can use them as experience in your profiles, which would be counted against those 2 to 4 years of experience as a penetration tester. Again, salaries would be from 50,500 USD to 100,000. In Indian rupees, it would be around 3.5 lakhs to 12 lakhs per annum. So these are the job roles in cybersecurity. Please post your comments if you have any questions, or if you have any feedback about whatever we have discussed so far in the comment section below. And with that, I thank you for going through this video, and your comments and your feedback will be most welcome. Thank you.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.